Kyle Busch won 200 finally. God, took him forever.
Yeah, what's wrong with him? Hey, pick up the pace next time, would you?
And you mentioned it last week, Mike, how disappointed, like when he gets out and does his interview on the front straightaway at Phoenix, he was talking about how he lost the races before. That's the first thing on his mind. First thing on his mind when he wins this weekend on the radio to his crew is, man, if we had not lost those other races at Phoenix and so forth in Vegas, we'd have I don't know how many races in a row. So that tells you, I think it says to me, I always wondered, like, why is this guy such a poor loser? How come he takes losing so badly that it makes you cringe?
Yeah.
And that kind of answers that question right there, because he is sitting here winning 200 races, this milestone that he's been looking forward to. They got the flag. They're rolling out the big production after the race, celebrating this moment. They've carried this from racetrack to racetrack to racetrack, and all he can think about is the races that he's just lost over the last couple weeks.
Right.
And so that just, I mean, not to cut Kyle too much of a break, but that tells you just how determined he is in winning and how much that he detests not winning.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've ever known a race car driver that was like that.
Well, the greats, and I'm talking about in athletics, I mean, like Michael Jordan and the ones that are known for their wins, the losses seem to stick in their craw a little bit more than the wins do. Yeah. They can't get over it. They can't, I
bet that other drivers were like, maybe Dad and other drivers were that way. They just weren't as open in discussing it. Plus, they didn't have a microphone in their face all the time. They didn't have social media and things like that to go to. But, it just, it just makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, I guess, with the whole thing, knowing just how much that means to him. It really does mean a lot to him, and so congratulations to Kyle. There's been, the funny thing, there's been it ain't a debate because it seems so one-sided, but there's been a lot of conversation on social media, and I try not to take too much stock in Twitter because it's a very small tip of the iceberg as far as, the public in general, and but it's a great place to go to complain, and a lot of people are saying, well, it's not like Richard's 200 wins. Well, I don't know that there is anybody saying it is. I haven't seen one person say,
"Thank you,
this is just like Richard's." There's just this whole demographic or large group of people saying, defending that it's, that people, defending this thing that's not happening. Nobody has said this is just like Richard's 200. I haven't seen it. Have you?
I have not seen that, although I did see the column that started trying to, I don't want to say take away from Richard's 200, which felt like an aggressive approach to a hot take.
Yeah.
But, and I don't even know if you intend to get to that part of the conversation. But anyways, no, I have not seen people trying to compare the two. If anything, I've seen people trying to reanalyze Richard's 200.
Yes. So that's the thing. All right. Nobody has said that I can, that I know of.
That matters. Nobody that matters.
I wouldn't want to. Nobody has said that they're the same. I don't know why everybody feels this defensive about it and protecting, the difference between the two or debating the difference between the two. Richards is 200 Cup wins. Kyle is a mixture of wins in different series. Still a very incredible feat. The guy has just won a ton of races, and I'll be honest. If anybody that did that, they would celebrate it. You think that people are gonna, if anybody else out there debating this or thinking this isn't a big deal, if this happened to you, your ass is gonna be waving a flag.
Oh yeah,
and I would too. I would be like, hell yeah, man! Props to me.
Yeah.
I put a lot into this, and 200 wins across all three series. I'm proud of it. So, good job for Kyle Busch. And he's 33 years old. He's got a lot more racing left. It'd be interesting to follow and see what else he does. But you touched on it, Mike. There's a column on Jeff Gluck. I think had a guest column on his site about sort of picking through Richard's wins and sort of and analyzing which ones maybe weren't legitimate, or I don't know if that's the right word.
That's not the right word. No. Yeah, they're all legitimate. He's basically saying that they were pre-modern era,
Right?
It's in that original era, and so if you eliminated those from the equation, that those numbers between Kyle and Richard look a lot more similar. But but there, I take a bit of an exception to to that even approach to Richard's 200.
Yeah,
because I don't think anybody is disagreeing that there's two different eras. Nobody actually is confused over the fact that Richard's 200s came during a time when there were probably fewer cars and there was also midweek races. I don't know anybody that confuses that, right? So don't go eliminate Richard's wins. They were still wins. You know that he was the benefit of racing in a time when there was the pre-modern era and the modern era, right? Or whatever you call the first era. And that's that. Yeah, the thing I took exception, I agreed with the guy on a lot of his points, but then here's where I split. He says, if I were at NASCAR, I would create a statistic called era-adjusted career wins. That would help fans better compare past drivers with a bit more realism. That's where you lost me. You don't need to go creating asterisks and stuff like that to go modify history. Don't go modify history. And NASCAR kind of has already done that by making a modern era. What else is that than just saying that the 1972 on is a modern era? I don't think that that's a conflated issue. So I don't know. I think you took defense to it. Did you not? Or you got a little defensive about it based off of people pecking at Richard Petty's 200 wins?
Yeah, of course. I think that that's sacred, and you just don't go there. Richard Petty has hung his hat on 200. It's as synonymous with him as his number and his sponsor, and STP and 43. I was there that day when he won that race, and I remember that that celebration and that landmark milestone that he had accomplished. And I think it's crazy to even discuss whether that's a realistic number or not, or whether some wins maybe weren't important or justified.
Right.
And so we weren't there. We can't go back and try to legitimize history if we weren't there to experience it. You can't. I don't want to hear or read somebody saying, well, it was against such and such competition and it was against gas station owners and factory Fords and Chevrolets right off the parking lot. You weren't there.
Right.
I wasn't there. How do you really know how tough the competition was that day, or what Richard Petty went through to get there, to go through the process of getting into that race and competing in that race? And just because of the length, there was conversation about the lengths of the races being short, being on dirt tracks, and the field being small. I mean, it just blows my mind that we would take something so sacred and try to, especially in the face of Richard Petty. I mean, he is at the track, involved in the sport. He's there every week. It's disgusting. It's insulting.
Yeah. And to what end? Where does it end if we are now going to do asterisks on things? Think about this. If you're okay with doing that on Richard Petty, in 100 years, then you're okay with us doing that to Kyle Busch, and in whatever amount of wins he ends up with. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, well, Kyle Busch, in 100 years, NASCAR cars have wings on it, and Kyle Busch didn't have wings on his car, so you got to actually X out some of these things. That's that day when those days when they ran gasoline in their car. Kyle Busch ran gasoline in his car. Now we run it on solar power NASCAR. I mean, in 100 years, you're going to be able to scrutinize everything. Are you going to take away Kyle Busch's wins? No. Don't take away Richard's. Don't take away Kyle's. There's incredible feats.
Yeah. I mean, there's Xfinity races where there were 17 to 20 Cup drivers in the field, and then there's Xfinity races where there's not any Cup drivers in the field. You don't look at those two races as any different. No matter, those, when you win either one, they go in the stat book and it counts.
There was a start and a finish, and somebody had to win it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's up?
I'll tell you this. I was listening to both of you. I think your sacred part of it hits the nail right on the damn head, and I haven't heard anybody say it like that. The asterisk point, not having an asterisk, is the absolute truth, and it got me thinking. My buddy Bloomer texted me, and I just pulled it up, and he's a funny cat. And he said, tonight I'm going back in time in my DeLorean that's in my driveway. I'm gonna invent the Busch series in 1959 and the Truck series as well. I'm going to change the course of history in level cross where the petty shop is so that Richard will race Cup, Busch, and trucks. When I get back from to 2019, he'll have 550 wins. That's why you don't put an asterisk next to that bit of history, because it is that. It's history. It's sacred.
Yeah, I just get a little worried that it's just like the Hall of Fame. Like it's challenging sometimes because there's so many guys that belong in that Hall of Fame, and there's not a lot of people that are around today that were experiencing their career and their impact on the sport. And as we get further, this is just something I'm concerned with the history of the sport as a whole. As we get further removed from it, do we forget just how important these guys were? And just how difficult it was for them and how challenging times were for them, how hard it was to trudge through those particular decades in the sport. And I feel like that this is touching on that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not appreciating exactly how challenging that might have been. And because none of us were there. We got to always try to appreciate the history of the sport and the guys that created the sport. And damn, man, I mean, Richard is, he's heard this, and it's got to annoy the hell out of Kyle and everyone else involved that's celebrated Richard for all these years. And I know that the article and the whole point wasn't to insult the king.
It's right. That's true.
It wasn't. But it could easily, if the conversation were to expand. And if people if we have this conversation out there, for it to get taken seriously is what I'm a little worried about.
The thought just occurred to me. It's like, this is not to disparage our current media, certainly not to disparage Jeff Gluck or the fellow that wrote that column. But, I wonder if we're sort of experiencing a little bit of the after effects of the way the media and the coverage of the sport has changed so much, and that a lot of those old timers and those historian type journalists are no longer in the media center.
Yeah.
Your Rick Minners, your Jim Pedleys, obviously a lot of these guys that not only know the history of the sport, but were friends with a lot of the people that we're talking about, and maybe some of the people. And now that they're not in the media center, they're not covering our sport, like maybe we're feeling a little bit more of the after effects and not having those old school guys. And again, that's not to disparage the current media. They do a fantastic job, but, having those wily old veterans matter, especially in the NASCAR Hall votes, especially in we don't have a whole lot of them anymore. They lost their jobs. A good many of them did.
And not knocking, Kyle, because that accomplishment is sick. But, you look at what Mike Joy said, it's kind of a cool line where he's like, he may not be the best of all time, but he's the best of his time. But I was listening to that, and the first thing I thought was like Jimmy Johnson sitting there going like, hey, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm still here.
Jimmy has all those wins and championships.
7 championships, more wins in those, that the first 16 years.
Yeah.
That than Kyle has had in Cup. So, it's interesting.
It is. I mean, Kyle is an amazing driver, no doubt about it. I feel like that we could have done all this without ever dragging the king into it.
Right.
And just celebrate what's happening, man.